So in case you came a little bit later in the evening, you are at the Polk County Real Estate Investors Association, PCREIA. We're so very happy to have you here tonight. And we are going to have a speaker that you are going to love. I've been promised this by someone who knows him very well. That is how I learned about Jeff, and it's through Adrian, our very own Adrian. He told me about Jeff. He was excited to maybe have him as a guest, and that enthusiasm just spilled over. I said, we got to have him then. Let's have him here so everybody can hear this good information. So instead of me introducing him like I normally would, I'm going to ask Adrian if he would, because you know Jeff so well that it would be great to hear how you met him and how you're connected with him. Adrian, let us know, would you?
Thank you, Liz. Yeah, I met him the same way that Susan did on the cruise. That was about 3 years ago, I believe. And Jeff, I believe you've been investing for 16 years, and now you take care of the note side, the lending side of your business. You guys do fix and flip, wholesale, rentals. You do a little bit of everything. When I say you guys, I mean you and Derek. And you take care of the paperwork side, as I know one of your favorite parts. You guys
now
also,
wait a minute. You talked about that cruise, so people don't know what you're talking about. Yeah. What cruise are you all cruising on? Tell us.
So
that sounds good.
That Bill Cook used to run, and the last one was a little over a year ago.
Right when COVID started.
Yeah, and that was the last cruise, and they're not doing it anymore. So, sorry, Bill Cook's not doing it anymore.
Right.
Jeff and Derek actually took it over, and
Jeff is doing the cruise as well now.
Yep.
Oh,
so now
wow,
they're
that's
in charge
awesome.
of. They kind of took over that cruise. Tony used to be the speaker on there. We'll see if Jeff can get him back on there ever. But so now you took it over, and it's Generations of Wealth voyage, and I don't know if it's out in the open yet, but I'll go ahead and say it may be coming to land soon.
It is.
I wasn't sure how open it was.
Yeah, no, everything is, we're like at the 99-yard line right now.
Okay.
We're just finalizing the contract, but it looks like it's going to be in Orlando at the Jimmy Buffett.
Ooh.
Now,
that sounds
Jeff,
really good.
You're low for me, Jeff. I don't know about anybody else, but Adrian and Liz are loud, but for me, you're low, but I don't know.
Am I quiet? Is this better?
You're a little bit lower. You have I think a lower pitched voice naturally. So yeah, as Jeff mentioned, they're going to be very close to us for the first one. And
now what do they do? What are they going to have at this? Because that would be great for folks to know about.
That's great news, Jeff.
I'll let Jeff talk about it at some point. And I can even is the website still going to be the same?
Yeah.
Okay.
Same website.
So I'll put that.
We have not updated the site yet to show the new stuff. That'll be happening probably in the next few weeks. Once the contracts are signed, and then all the photos and stuff from the resort are sent to us, the web guys will get the update done, and then we'll go live with it.
But the one thing I know that we can say is that it's for investors. It's about real estate investing. There's speakers, there's events, there's silly stuff that goes on. It's very intimate, is my understanding, and especially when you all had it as a cruise. And so that's the kind of thing that it is. And that's why Susan and Adrian went, was to meet a bunch of other investors from all over the country and go to these classes, right?
You were basically stuck on a boat with investors, and all you did is talk about real estate, which is awesome to me. Now you'll be stuck at a resort that's the way I'm going to see it. And you just get to talk. There's always someone that wants to talk real estate. And one thing I remember you guys talking about that you're going to be putting more emphasis on is hopefully having maybe some classes for kids and teenagers. And I think that is an awesome part. So
excellent.
Correct me if I'm wrong, Jeff. That's what you guys eventually want to at least have that, so that people can bring their kids.
Right.
And get them started even earlier.
That's why it's called the Generations of Wealth. It's more of an advanced, like a middle of the road to advanced type of a conference for people, but it's all about trying to get the knowledge that those of us that have been playing the game for a long time down into the younger generations. So we're trying to encourage people to bring their kids, their grandkids, whatever, and get them to participate with what we're doing.
The other way I know Jeff is him and Derek, his same partner. They run a mastermind called Circle of Trust, and I joined that a little over a year ago, and it's been awesome. It's a small, intimate group, and if you're familiar with masterminds, this is one of the good ones. I say that because it's not just a pitch sesh. Everyone is extremely open and transparent, which I think is one of the most important things of a mastermind.
Absolutely.
And Jeff is, I mean, he's just complete open book of this is what we are actively doing right now, or this is what we're even trying with marketing. So he'll tell us stuff that, you know, and other people in the group just talk about what they're doing and what they're even testing. And most of the big speakers tell you what they did a few years ago in the past instead. So Jeff, with that, I'm going to let you take it over and tell us all about paperwork and lending and money. And I should also mention you are in Wisconsin. So
Correct.
For those we're not on early, it is cold up there right now. And he says it's beautiful. If you're out inside looking out, it looks beautiful out, is what he says.
Yep, for sure. It was a sunny day today with a balmy temperature of 39. So,
Woo!
All right, Jeff, take it away.
Yeah. All right. So I'm going to share my screen here right away.
I may have to turn that on. Okay, you should be good.
All right. Share. Well, where is it? All right. Now I got to find it because it's not letting me share it because I can't see it. Hold on a second. I got to hit play on it first. There we go. All right. And now I got to find where I am again. Good grief. You're making this hard on me.
Sorry. This is the most challenging part of the night. You're good.
Oh, yeah. So now I think I can share the screen. All right. You guys see my screen?
Yep.
All right. Now, I don't know why it did that, but it switched monitors on me now too. Oh, well, that's awesome. Now I got to stare off to the left, or my right, your left. Oop. All right. So I'm going to move my chat box over, all my participants. So anyway, I'm Jeff. I own a company called Best REI Funding, among numerous other things that we do. I'm just going to start out by saying, I'm going to start out really with my disclaimer. So when you guys did your legal thing up front where, Adrian said that you guys should absolutely not listen to me, he's not kidding. You shouldn't listen to me. I mean, I'm a pretty open book. I tell it how it is from my point of view, but that doesn't mean my point of view is the right view. It doesn't mean that it works for you, and really doesn't mean that it works for anybody other than me. So, anything I say or anybody else says, make sure you guys double check us, get lots of opinions, whatever. There's some interesting things that we're going to talk about regarding due diligence and money and funding for deals and all that kind of stuff. And it's actually going to be probably a much deeper dive than what you guys are kind of expecting. And a lot of what I think I'm going to try to talk about tonight may or may not apply to most of your deals. But what I'm hoping to do is give you guys a deep dive into essentially a lender's brain so that you guys can start understanding how to make pitches for private capital, how to talk to your hard money lenders better, all that fun stuff. I can't guarantee anybody's going to make money doing anything that I'm about to tell you. I'm not always politically correct, so you do have to, give me a slight amount of forgiveness. I may drop a swear word or something in there if it just seems like it fits, and whatever we talk about tonight, pick the best, throw out the rest. So that's pretty much how it goes for me. In every presentation, everybody always talks about, let me tell you about myself, let me tell you about my family and all that kind of stuff. And honestly, you know, I'm from Wisconsin. I'm not from your market. And really, most of my personal life doesn't have a lot to do with what you guys are doing down there. I'd really much rather just dig into the meat and potatoes and just talk about what you guys are experiencing. You know, as Adrian kind of alluded, I'm an investor. We're active flippers, we're active wholesalers, we're active landlords, and we're running masterminds. We're running an annual event every year, and we're running a lending company. And on top of that, we own a sand quarry and a jade quarry. You know, so there's just a gazillion things going on. And the only reason to tell you all that stuff is just because it sort of explains why my point of view is a little different than a lot of people's out there, because I'm looking at things from 6, 8, 10 different angles at a time. You know, David Tilney's on the phone or on the call here with us. David's a great friend and a true mentor, and you guys are blessed to have him on this call. I don't think he gets to stay for the entire call tonight, so he won't be on for the call after the call. But if you ever get a chance to sit down and spend some time talking to David, you absolutely need to. He is a tremendous resource. I can see Susan's shaking her head yes. Adrian's nodding his head yes. David's reputation makes my reputation look like I'm, you know, trash. And that's my opinion, because that's how highly I think of David. You know, and I'm not trying to cut on myself when I say that. That's really just, David's an amazing guy. I love Susan, love Adrian. I also noticed, if I can see him again, JR McLaughlin's on the call too. I haven't seen JR in forever, but also another friend. It's always good to see people. So today we're really not going to spend a lot of time talking about me. We'll talk about what I know, how I know it, how I do it, why I do it the way that I do it, why the way I think the way that I think sometimes. You know, and it's pretty unique in a lot of cases. Some of it might be repeat for some of you. But here up on the slide, you can actually see how to pronounce my last name. It's always interesting because no one can pronounce it if you see how it's spelled. So it's pronounced Cichocki, like S-H-A and then husky like a dog. For those of you that care.
I'm so glad I didn't try that. Oh my gosh. I would have really butchered that one, Jeff.
Yeah, everybody says Cichocki, Cichocki, Coochie. I mean, I've had just about anything and everything said about my last name. Usually I get the weird ones from friends, you know, people like Bill Cook and stuff like that. I'm just going to skip through these slides here real quick. So before we get going, I do have a couple of questions and I want to run past the group. And I would love it if you guys would actually take the time to go into the chat box and answer the questions as best you can. Because I think that seeing all the responses really, and this isn't for me as much as it is for all of you, it's really for yourselves to see this. Okay, so get your fingers ready to the keyboard and get ready to answer. So how many investors do you guys know who or yourself who have ever put a property under contract because you couldn't wait to lose money? Right? I mean, how many of you guys actually get excited to lose money? How many of you guys ever thought to yourself that you would lose money when you put property under contract? Right? There's no one that's going to answer this as, man, I do it all the time. I love it. I can't wait to lose money. I put properties under contract all the time to lose money. Remember this question, because this is going to come back later as we go through things and we kind of explain some stuff. So here's question number 2. What's the most important thing in the deal? As a lender or as a capital investor, not as the wholesaler, not as the flipper, but the person who's putting money in the deal. Is it getting your money back or getting a high rate of return? I'll give you guys a couple seconds to throw some out there. Well, this one, we're getting a little bit more of a flip-flop in answers between the two. It's a little more even. Anybody else got an opinion who wants to throw it up there? So I think money back is winning by a slight margin, but not a huge landslide. I'm going to tell you right now that in most cases, the person who's lending you guys the money, the most important thing for them is getting it back. It's almost never the rate of return. Now remember that as well, because that comes into play as we talk about a few other things later on as well, because it comes into play for the conversations that you have to have as we're talking about doing this stuff. So one of the things that you should also try to figure out or try to answer in your deals is, who are you doing the deal for? Are you doing the deal for your own ego? Are you doing it for your family? That same question should be asked for the investor that you're working with, especially if they're a newer private lender who doesn't have a really long track record of lending money on real estate. Because when they don't have a really long track record, they're kind of dependent on you to think about these things. As the wholesaler, as the flipper, as the landlord, they're trusting you more than they're trusting the deal. So you kind of got to know and put things in check. I know most people don't ask, are you trying to go out and get private money just to satisfy your ego to say that you can? Are you doing it to take care of your family, or are you doing it to take care of their family? It's rarely talked about. It's always just talked about as, we got to go get it. Are you an ideal borrower? What's an ideal borrower look like? Why do they look like it? Who's on your team? Who's your title company? Who's your attorney? Who's the custodian that you work with the most? If you're going to deal with any kind of private capital out there, you need to understand some of these things, because these are the people that you need to help bring to the table if your private investor doesn't have experience. Yes, some of these guys will cost you a little bit of money, maybe a little bit of profit to do it. But if you don't take care of your lenders, they won't take care of you long-term. You'll lose them because you'll end up being disorganized, inefficient. A deal will go sideways. And when they don't have experience, they will freak out. I can tell you that because, well, I've done these dumb things. So what is your what, right? What is it that you're trying to accomplish? What is it that you find important? Are you trying to do participation in other people's deals? Are you trying to find people to participate in your deals, like joint ventures and stuff? If you're going to take out a loan, what kind of loan are you guys looking for? What is your risk tolerance when you guys buy a property? What is the risk tolerance of the lender that you're working with? You know, most of the stuff we're going to try to talk about tonight, yeah, it's coming from the mouth of somebody that does a lot of loans every month, but these are the things that you guys need to think about. Oh, and by the way, we said we were going to start out some rules for tonight's meeting. You guys are allowed to interrupt me if you want. That doesn't bother me. It's not going to knock me off of task. I'm a pretty open book, and you know, if something that you see on a slide triggers a tangent, it's okay. You know, we'll be able to bring you back around once we, you know, veer off for a little while. So anyway, what's the exit strategy? How many exit strategies do you have? Do you have one? Like if you're doing a flip and your only exit strategy is to sell it, what will you do if you can't? I know it's a really hot market right now. I know houses are flying off the shelf, but they're not always going to fly off the shelf like they are today. And so that's why you have to have multiple exit strategies. You need to know what you can do with your flip if you can't get it sold, or how far can you discount it to get it unloaded to get your money back to your investor. Or if you paid cash, how are you going to get your money back, right?
Yeah. Oh. Sorry, I got a lot of echo.
All right.
Let's
Susan's
say
echoing.
I'm new. What would be the best way to evaluate these questions if I don't know the answers?
Well, we're hopefully going to answer some of these as we go. That's kind of the intention of showing some of the stuff that we're going to go through tonight, because this is really like a deep dive into due diligence. And the reason that there's going to be a heavier focus on due diligence is because through the due diligence process, You figure out whether or not it's a good deal for you, but you also have to be thinking about whether or not it's a good deal for your lender, whether they're hard money lender, whether a private lender, it doesn't matter. Or even if it's your own money, right? You need to figure out that stuff. And that's where the due diligence and some of the stuff we're going to dig into as we go should help you guys start clarifying and answering these questions. Okay. So that's all coming. So you also have to know where you are, right? So what state are you in? Are you in a mortgage state? Or are you in a deed of trust state? It's different, right? Wisconsin, we're a mortgage state. If I'm not mistaken, Florida is a deed of trust state. Are you guys mortgage too? Anybody?
Mortgage.
Mortgage. Okay. So you guys are a mortgage state as well. Do you guys use title companies, attorneys, both? You need to know. Who do you prefer? Who works with investors well? Who can close as fast as you guys want to close? Right? What's the foreclosure law and timeline? What's it going to take to do a deed in lieu in your state? If something goes sideways, and pretend for a second if you're the lender. And for most of the conversation tonight, I'm actually hoping you guys put the glasses on that are lender glasses, because I'm trying to get you guys to look at it from that point of view so that you are able to raise the money on the other side for yourselves. And if there's a lien on the property, is there any impact? What is it? What is it? Are there any mechanics liens? Does the person that you're buying from have any liens or judgments against themselves? Is it going to impact your closing? I mean, there's a million things of ways to put liens on properties, and you have to kind of learn about liens. So you have to ask yourself why, right? So I just said what we have to go look at, but why do we have to do it? Well, we have to find out, is it really good for you? Is it good for your lender? Is it all about lending versus landlording? Because when you're talking about private capital, some people want to invest in real estate, but they don't want to be a landlord, and they don't want to be a flipper, and they don't want to be, but they want to make those profits that are potential from real estate deals. And so figuring that out as well for yourself and for the person or company you're dealing with helps to marry and match all that stuff up. Why do you want this particular type of loan? Are you looking at a fix and flip loan? Are you looking at a BRRRR loan? Are you looking at a bridge loan? Are you looking at a long-term funding loan? You have to know what kind of loan or financing that you're after so that you can clearly explain to your lender what it is. And how do you wish to exit? Or do you wish to exit? Maybe you don't want to exit. Maybe you want to stay forever. Why this loan? This is actually one of the questions that I actually ask on my loan application for people who come into us is, why should I lend to you? What is it about you that makes you a good risk? I get the craziest answers in that question. Some of them are really, really hilarious, and others are, well, pretty not so good. I don't have any nice words for it, right? In the game of real estate investment, you have to have a set of money rules. And those money rules have to be wrapped around loan to value. What is a safe loan to value for you as a borrower or you as a lender? What's safe if you're borrowing money? What is safe for your lender? I know that every single investor out there wants to put zero money down, take out the maximum loan they can, take a cash out at closing and put money in their pocket, right? Because that's the ideal thing. Essentially get paid to go buy real estate. The question is that really the best for everybody involved? Does that put your lender at risk? Does it put you at risk? So you need to come up with a money rule for what you're willing to accept from a loan to value perspective. What rates and fees? What fees are you willing to pay? What rate are you willing to pay? If you're the lender, what rate do you need? What fees do you need to feel safe and comfortable in the deal? These numbers can change from deal to deal. I could do a deal with Adrian today, and based on a really low LTV because it's super safe, I might discount the interest rate I need to make. I might waive fees because this is a much safer deal. Instead, Adrian brings me a mobile home frame with no home on top and says, I'm going to build a mobile home on this frame. Well, there's really nothing there right now. And he has no park to put it in, no land to park it on, but he's just telling me, man, I got this trailer that I'm going to build something and make it up. Well, that starts to get a little bit higher risk because now you're taking a stab at nothing, right? You're betting on something that isn't there. That's high risk. So I might raise my rates and fees to compensate for the risk that I'm taking. And you as the borrower or you as the investor need to understand the risk scenario so that you can essentially pay accordingly and be prepared to pay accordingly. I see way too many investors who come to me and they think that they should be able to borrow hard money at 3%, like they can go get at the bank, except you can't go to the bank and get 3% money on a flip. I mean, that just doesn't happen. People, I'll tell them what my rate is and, they tell me I'm crazy. There's no way I can charge that kind of stuff. I'm a crook. I'm whatever. That doesn't happen very often, but that comes in from people not having any money rules. They don't have proper expectations. And quite honestly, slightly delusional. Monthly payments. Can you afford to make monthly payments? What can you afford to make? Interest only? Can you afford principal and interest? What is it that's going to make your lender feel good? What do they want for monthly payments? I see a lot of people, I'm assuming this is prevalent everywhere, but in my area, no one wants to make a monthly payment. They don't want interest payments. They don't want principal and interest payments. They just want to let everything accrue till the back end. That got taught years and years ago, and it just kind of stuck around. And so everybody's looking for private capital from people who don't know any better, who don't understand that really it's not that safe to not have payments. People tend to forget about the loan that they have when they don't have any payments. The priority to finish a rehab, and I can tell you this from personal experience as a lender, when there aren't any payments and things involved, sometimes projects take a lot longer than they thought because there's no pain. There's no reminder during the month to remember the priority of the project and where you're sitting with it. Escrowing rehab funds. I got a guy, I don't know, it was about 2 weeks ago. He was going to do a project. The project was good. We liked everything about it. It was almost $100,000 in renovations costs to do the project. And he wanted the $100,000 as a check at closing so he could put it in his bank account. Now, from an investor standpoint, from a flipper standpoint, that's ideal. I mean, if somebody would give you the money, you manage everything, you run the whole thing. But from a safety perspective, is that doing the right thing for the lender? If you are the lender, is that doing you any safety for your funds? It's too easy to walk off with money. It's too easy to misappropriate things. It's too easy to rob Peter to pay Paul and take funds from one project and go put them in another. I've had people ask me for draws on rehabs that they're working on, and they send me, let's just say, a picture of a water heater. And, they're like, hey, I need to get $400 reimbursed for this water heater. This is what I had installed. And the water heater was installed on a different house other than the one that I lent on. I'm not going to reimburse for a water heater that's not part of my property. This is part of why rehab, the escrows are important, because it helps to keep honest people honest. And so as a flipper or as somebody who's doing a BRRRR project, you have to understand that most of the things that we're talking about from a due diligence and a lending or borrowing perspective all have to do with that return of capital, right? Because that is safety. That's the first thing that investors look for, is the safety of their capital. Giving out $100,000 in cash is never safe. Yeah.
Jeff, let's say there's some people on here are thinking about being private lenders.
Yep.
Let's say I'm a new private lender. How would I know that that water heater was on a different project?
So there's a couple
How
different
did
things.
you know?
Yeah, there's a couple different things. So the first thing I do is I actually changed my process so that I no longer accept pictures of anything. Now, I still ask people to send me pictures because I want to see progress of the work. Before I get, because at this point, there's two different ways, and it depends on what the relationship is with your borrower, what your trust level is, how comfortable you are with certain things. I now require my borrowers, in order to just apply to get reimbursed for their draw, they also have to send me a video. That video has to start out on the sidewalk so that I can see the front of the house number, the whole 9 yards, and then you walk in. And I don't need the video to be, super high quality. What I'm trying to do is I just want to see a video of the inside of the house where you show me where the pictures were taken so that I can match the picture to the house. If the pictures and the video match and I still want to get another pair of eyes on it, well, then you can get an inspector to go. You can go yourself. You can hire third parties to do things. There's always somebody out there that's willing to help you protect your money. There are fees for it. In our area, I don't know what it is in Florida, but in our area, it's about 125 to 150 bucks to send an inspector out to verify the work in a project.
No, that's great insight. I actually have a realtor that I work with,
Mhm.
and who's going to get the project at the end, the listing.
Yep.
And I just have them check periodically. Are they on the job? Not
Yep.
drinking, not smoking weed, not doing stuff they're not supposed to, just kind of check in on it. What's the progress? Just an independent,
Yep.
to check on projects that I don't. Those of you know me, I'm not the rehabber type anyway. Anybody knows me, I'm like Pete rehabber, we make jokes about that. But yeah, so that's what I do. I have someone independent who's going to list the project, and if there's any concerns about anything they might have as the person who's going to list the end project, the end product also, and they do it for free because they're going to get them. So I mean, that's things that I do. So that was great about the video. Thank you for that insight. I love it.
Yeah. And I've heard others do the same thing where they use the listing agent as someone who can go out and do the inspections for you. For me, just because of the volume of loans and things that we're running, I don't use agents. I have done it like a long time ago, but it's probably been 10 years since I've used an agent to do it. So either now it's our project manager from our flip company will go out and inspect properties for us if he's busy. And it's convenient for me. And because sometimes I do like to just get out as an investor, I like to get out and see what other people are doing and not just sit behind the desk. So sometimes I'll go do the inspections. It also builds, it helps to build the relationship up between myself and the borrowers and the people that I'm working with by showing up on site. And then I get an opportunity to just have off the cuff, unplanned conversations about, hey, what's going on? How did this turn out for you? How'd you get this? What went on here? And, as investors, we're proud of our properties when we're flipping them and doing the rehab and the quality of the work that we're doing. And so we love to talk about it. So it works well for me. Andrew, do you got something to throw on there? I noticed you popped your mic off.
Yeah. Excuse me. I was going to ask, excuse me, how many, out of all your overall loans that you do, how many would you say have a rehab, construction component to them? Talking bridge loans only, presumably these are like 1-year bridge, or similar. How many of your loans would you say as a percentage overall have a rehab component, and how many don't have a rehab component where the lender just does their own rehab and they don't want you involved?
I would say probably 90 to 95% of all of our loans incorporate some sort of rehab to them. That's kind of the niche that I'm in, and everybody kind of knows that's the niche for me. And so that seems to be the majority of the loans people bring to me for what they're looking for.
For me, it's like 50-50. I try to like steer people away from that just because of the friggin' post-closing hassle. I'm trying to build out more of these processes to deal with it. But honestly, it feels like the people that don't want the rehab fund, if they don't want me involved in their project, those are actually like the cream of the crop investors,
Oh, yeah,
like the
of course.
best possible people, because they're
Yeah.
just self-sufficient. They don't want you in their way, and they're just zipping through deals, you know?
Yes.
So I
Yep.
didn't know if you had a similar observation, but it sounds like you're, a lot of your service is driven behind providing, you know, those higher leverage rehab loans.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, we do. I mean, we do the vast majority of everything is rehab construction type loans for us.
Mhm.
You know, obviously, I mean, I have the ability to lend nationwide, but I really don't. I mean, that was kind of my comment before we all got started, was the fact that it's awesome to have someone local like yourself mixed into the REIA, because dealing with local lenders really brings an additional layer of safety to the mix. It brings in a separate level of experience to the mix. You know, the interesting thing, which is part of why, you know, Adrian and Liz asked me to speak, is because I'm not from your area. And so I bring in kind of an outsider's perspective of looking at things. But when it comes to actually doing the deals, you guys really should be looking to someone local. As much as it's possible for me to service what you guys are doing, I'm really not your best candidate, as are most of the national lenders are really not your best first choice. It should be the private capital that's local. It should be the hard money lenders that are local, because they're the ones that know your market. When things start to go sideways in a project, they're the ones with the experience to help get you out or get you through the deal so that you can come out the other side, you know, still standing on 2 feet, because nobody wants to lose in a deal. You know, we all want everybody involved in the deal to be successful and make money. We want, you know, the borrower to be successful. We want the contractors to be successful. We want the agents to be successful. We want the title company to be successful, right? I mean, we want everybody involved to be successful, because these are all the people on our team that we need for ourselves to be successful. So it's important to really do that, you know, local as much as humanly possible. So it's awesome you guys got Andrew in your mix. So kind of just jumping back into the money rules. So lien position is really important. As a lender with the amount of experience I've got, I don't do loans in second position unless I already control the first. That's my stance on being first, being second, being third. I have to control everything in front of me, or it's not a good deal for me, because I don't ever want to be in a position where somebody else can take my capital through the foreclosure process. That's just something I don't want to get into. Some lenders allow junior liens against it. Most hard money lenders don't. It's a pain in the butt to deal with. It takes away the right. If there's a second loan in position, it's really hard to do a deed in lieu of foreclosure, because whoever's in first position doesn't want to assume the responsibility of the second loan. And if they do a deed in lieu while there's a second there, that's exactly what they're doing. And that's important to understand too, because if you're borrowing private capital, you don't want to have, say, 7 different investors funding your deal. Someone's in first, someone's in second, all the way to 7. I got involved in a deal like that one time, and it was a nightmare to unravel, because the deal on the end did not go as smoothly as it should have. And when you have 7 lenders in a deal, there's a lot of opportunity for somebody to start screaming foul. And when lenders have their capital threatened, they'll get agitated pretty quick. So you want to keep yourself clean and safe. So really try to keep it to 1 loan, if at all possible. You know, 2 if you need it, but just make sure everybody understands their position and, you know, what that risk is for them. And then lien waivers. Do you collect lien waivers? Do you not collect lien waivers? Does your lender require you to collect lien waivers? Does the lender enforce the fact that they expect you to collect lien waivers?
Can you do a brief description of what that is? Because I didn't understand what those were for years.
Okay. So a lien waiver is when a contractor comes in and does work on your property. And let's say that they do $5,000 worth of work. When you write the check for $5,000 to pay you, you have them sign a lien waiver, which waives their right to ever be able to file a mechanics lien against your property. And if they do, because I mean, people still could, if they do decide to do that with your lien waiver, you can go and have it removed pretty easily because they've already attested to the fact that they were in fact paid in full. So lien waivers are important to collect. If you write checks to everybody, it's still, you know, even if you don't have a lien waiver, you can still prove the fact that you paid someone and you can have the liens released. It's just a lot more headache down in the courthouse trying to get that through without that lien waiver, because it's just your check versus their word. But a lien waiver is their word, not yours. So it trumps the check. Yeah, Susan.
Jeff, I have a question. I
Yep.
worked at a construction company, and on the back of the check where they endorsed it, underneath there was a statement that by signing this and cashing this check, it was a lien waiver statement underneath that.
Mhm.
Have you ever seen that? And would that hold up in court? Because I was always curious about that. Would that ever really hold any water? I mean, you know, because you know that yourself, sometimes when people don't pay their subs or whatever, you know, I mean,
Yep.
by signing that, because if they didn't get the release from the sub, you know, because they had subs. And so their sub, when they paid their subs, when they sub cashed their check, they got a lien waiver from them on the back of that check. What do you think about that?
So the lien waiver on the back of the checks do hold up in court. At least they have here in Wisconsin. And so there are people that use them. I still personally prefer to get the official lien waiver. And the reason is because it's a cleaner paper trail than just the checks, because they can still challenge the check and say, well, I didn't actually agree to anything. And yet, you know, you're saying, yeah, you did because you cashed the check. Right. And so you're always trying to take things from the point of view of what would a judge do? How would a judge feel about this scenario? So I really like the full 8.5 by 11, you know, lien waiver that they're signing and attesting to things. The place that I've seen things get a little wonky with subcontractors, especially, is when you hire a general contractor and the general contractor is billing you for the subcontractor's work. And so let's say that the subcontractor did $3,000 worth of work and the general contractor sends you a bill for $10,000 because he's got other subs or himself included, and he doesn't pay the subcontractor. The general contractor signs a lien waiver saying he was paid 10 grand, but the sub never signed off and the sub never got paid. If the sub files a mechanics lien on the property, it's a pain to get released, if not impossible, because you have to sue the general contractor to get the funds back to go pay the sub. That one gets to be a real pain in the butt. So monitoring general contractors and subcontractor payments, it's not something that happens that often, but when it happens, it's painful financially.
Do you have a rule of thumb over a certain amount for a sub that they charge you? Then do you require them to submit a lien release for that sub being paid? That's the reason that this particular company did that, so they would never have that problem where a sub could come back and they could get in trouble saying they didn't get paid by, you know, by giving them the check with that endorsement on it. They couldn't, you know, charge back the job and cause problems for them with their particular,
the unfortunate part is that theory is no different than me having them sign a piece of paper for the waiver in the scenario where you paid it to the general and the general paid the sub.
Yeah.
Right. So if the check never makes it to the sub from you, the sub never signs the back of a check and the sub never releases. That's where it
That's what
gets
I
messy.
mean. For the general to get paid, do you require that there is something in it? Do you hold back? I know you hold the traditional 10% back. Is that what you hold back? Do you hold any additional back for that until they get that release from the sub over a certain amount to protect yourself, or no?
Recently, we actually changed it. So I no longer reimburse for subcontractors to general contractors or investors. I pay subcontractors directly myself.
That's
My
the best,
bookkeeper,
honestly.
My bookkeeper loves it and my bookkeeper hates it, right? Because now it creates all these extra entries and all this extra stuff they got to track, because technically
1099.
I pay on behalf of my borrower to a contractor. I'm the one responsible to do the 1099, not the borrower.
Yes.
And so we take on an extra added layer of tax responsibility by doing that. But the added cost that comes to us is minimal in
Yeah.
comparison to the risk of the capital being
Correct.
lost
Mhm.
through those funky scenarios.
Correct.
So we came
Agreed.
up with this about 6 months ago, and we also try to pay via ACH as well, so that I have electronic payments, and we get ACH account information from all of the contractors so that I can pay. Now, the cool thing is, though, is I will tell you that the contractors and subcontractors that we've been doing the ACH payments directly to on behalf of the borrower are eating it up, because it fixes a cash flow problem in their business, because I'm paying faster. And the problem is, you know, like different banks have different dollar amounts, but let's just say your bank has a $5,000 limit. And that $5,000 limit is where they put the hold on the funds until the check clears. And banks, even if the check clears in 1 day, they'll usually put a 5 to 7 day hold on it. Well, if I write a check to Susan for $5,000 and she's my borrower, and Susan cashes the check and her bank puts a 5 day hold on it, she just lost a week. Then Susan has to write a check to the contractor, who then has to get another lock on the pay for another week. And so now something that should have happened in a day just took 2 weeks.
Right.
So when we ACH the funds are spendable immediately, and there's no locks on the cashing of the check. And the nice thing about ACH too, ACH is really comes in the form of an electronic check. That's really how they work. Because if you overpay someone or you pay them by accident, you can actually do what's called a negative ACH, and you can draw the money back out of their account and pull it. That's all part of the ACH agreement that they sign, is that they're allowing me to deposit in their account, which no one will ever tell me, no, I can't deposit in their account with or without an ACH form, but you can't draw from their account without authorization. And that's where the critical side of ACH forms come in. So you protect yourself on the backside as well.
That's great. Thank
No.
you. Yeah,
Yep.
no, I totally agree with you. But do you have a dollar amount threshold? That's really my question for the subs. Or do you do the typical 1099 threshold, or do you just do it as a rule every single sub?
I have a rule at $3,000. It's an unofficial rule. We bend it up or down depending on the situation a little bit.
Okay.
Because we manage the escrow accounts all in-house for ourselves. We don't let the title companies hold our escrow funds for us. And so we can be a little bit more flexible as needed. That also gives us the ability to do more draws if needed, if they need more than 3. Because, as a flipper and as an investor in doing that stuff, I learned a long time ago that contractors in general have cash flow problems for a lot of them. They're floating a lot of money on credit lines, at Home Depot or whatever outlet that they're buying their materials and stuff from. And they're paying interest and they're paying all these things because they're floating money for 60 days at a clip. And so they're always worried with that cash flow to make sure they have enough to pay their employees, because they got payroll to meet as well. And if we as investors don't pay them more than once a month, once every 6 weeks, once every 8 weeks, like when we can get a draw out of a title company, you really hurt your contractor. And so I actually learned this from a contractor who actually asked me to pay him more often. And it was just kind of by accident. And he was open and upfront that, he's always worried about making sure he has money for payroll. And he asked me if I would pay him every 2 weeks so that it would match his payroll. And my answer to him was, listen, if you want me standing here in this project every Friday afternoon at 3 p.m., I'll write you a check every single week. But in trade, I ask for a much more detailed scope of work from a contractor who wants to be paid more often. And what I do is I have them give me a scope of work based on tasks that need to be completed, so that when the inspections are done, you walk in and you check off the tasks. And so let's say installing a kitchen, as an example, is going to be 3 separate tasks, right? So they could do demo of the kitchen as a task. They could have mounting the cabinets as a task and installing the countertops as a task. So as each one of those 3 things gets done, we can issue a smaller release of funds to the contractor, which significantly improves their payroll. Now, here's why I learned this, because this is what really stuck out. When I started paying my contractors more frequently than the typical draw schedule, I started finding out that my contractors started paying more attention to our projects, and they would fix small things that they just noticed in the property for free. They would go, listen, we were doing this and we just noticed this was out of alignment, so we just fixed that for you. I also noticed that contractors have a really bad habit of overpromising and under-delivering, meaning they show up for an hour, they load up their tools, and then they go to another job. They work for an hour, they load up their tools, they go work for another hour, right? Because they're trying to make everybody happy, but you really can't get any work done. So what I noticed was the more frequently I paid, the longer that the contractors stayed on my projects. And so the number of days that it took to complete the work started to shrink drastically.
Wow.
Right. And so I went from an hour a day to 2 hours a day to 4 hours a day to pretty soon they were spending whole days with me, and they'd knock out my project in 3, 4, 5 days instead of 3 weeks. Well, when you start saving that much time, the real impact is I pay less in interest, I pay less in property taxes, I pay less in utilities, right? All these holding costs that come with properties, I just started saving just a ton of money because these guys were saving me a ton of money. And then the other thing that I noticed, which doesn't really have anything to do with tonight's presentation at all, was that when the more money I saved, I started putting it into a separate account. And periodically I took a little chunk of money out of there, and I would walk over to the contractor and I gave him a bonus. Right? If I knew he had a crew of 4 people, I would walk through and I'd give, like the 3 just general laborers each $100, and I'd give 200, say, to the main contractor, the foreman, and just say, thank you guys so much for the work you're doing. I really appreciate you guys put in all this extra time and effort to get my projects done faster. I just want to say thank you. It's the little stupid things like that. I saved $1,000 and I spent $350 to fix it, $400. So you give a little bit, but you end up making more money yourself. So anyway, it's just me. I think about it. I think as a lender based on an investor's point of view most of the time. So that's why I kind of warned you guys up front. I come from a different angle than most lenders do. So. All right.
I love this, Jeff. That is so great that you treat them that way. I know I treat my vendors like they are gold. I mean, because they make me money. They keep me, keep it all going. This is fabulous.
Yep. So I just threw this slide or 2 in here just on some random miscellaneous thoughts that jump through my mind as I'm doing the things that we're talking about. As a capital investor, a yield that people are looking for is only a target. It's not a guarantee. It's a target. Even if someone lent you money, and let's just say at 12% interest, because that's a nice easy one, it's 1% per month, right? So for easy math, if I borrowed money at 12% and my investor was thinking that they were getting 12%, yes, they're getting 12% on their money, but if I only borrowed it for 6 months, they only netted 6%. So if they don't lend the money back out for the rest of the 6 months of the year, their yield is wrong, because they're not going to yield that 12% they were hoping for. They're only going to yield 6, right? So yields are only targets. Keep that in mind. Capital and private investors want to keep their money as invested and as active as humanly possible. And as investors, obviously, we want to do as many projects as we can so that we make as much money. But we also want to make sure that we're doing enough projects to keep our lenders' money busy as well, because that's how they make money. And Liz had made a comment in the chat box that says a win-win, right? Well, that's exactly what this is. You're trying to look for win-wins. How can I keep their yield up as high as possible for them without overtaxing my projects? Yields are not realized until you are paid off. So if you're sitting as the investor, right, the lender, realize yield is only a target. And in the event that you never get paid off, right, taking this from the worst case scenario, what if you have to foreclose? If the lender has to foreclose, they don't get paid off until they foreclose and then liquidate the property. So what's the yield at that point? Probably not what they were expecting, not going to even get close to their target. Never take on more risk than the borrower does. As an investor, if you have capital and you want to put it into a deal, if you want to be a note investor, never take on more risk than the borrower. There's a concept out there that most people never really talk about, but it's called risk transference. The easiest way for me to explain risk transference is loan to value. The higher the loan to value, the higher the risk to the lender. The lower the LTV, the lower the risk to the lender. The ideal scenario is figuring out, that's why most lenders are in that 65 to 70% range for hard money and stuff like that, because they're transferring some of the risk onto the investor, the person who's doing the flip. If the person with the money takes all of the risk, it's hard to make it a win-win for both sides. You have to find a balance in there. Risk transference. Never conform to the deal conforms to you, right? I don't know how many of you guys ever heard it, never force a deal. Best piece of advice I ever got, I don't remember who told this to me, but the best piece of advice I ever got was, sometimes the best deal you'll ever do in your whole life is the one you didn't. So never conform to the deal. All right, so let's talk about reducing risk and increasing profits. There's 5 different sections of doing this, right? So you've got first contact, which is, you can use first contact as the lead gen for buying the property. First contact is with the private capital or hard money lender that you want to use. You've got to talk about the deal and how do we minimize the deal risk so that we can maximize profits. How do you work with the closer, which is your title company or the closing attorney that you use? Who and how and what for preparing documents? Like, why is that important? And ultimately, we land at the closing table, right? So we can acquire and do the deed. So first contact. On first contact, I always ask, when I'm the lender, I ask 2 questions. And if they can't satisfy these 2 questions, I have no more questions for them in the deal. I'm not interested in funding. The first one is, tell me about you and you, the borrower. Tell me about your experience. Tell me about how many projects you've done. Tell me about, what kind of projects that you're for. Tell me about your experience. And during that conversation, I usually kind of start asking questions so I can kind of figure out a little bit about the person themselves, because I'm also trying to check for character and integrity. And people will reveal themselves to you in very casual conversations. It's very, very easy to detect or have your BS meter get pegged, if you're asking really good questions. And then the second thing I say is, tell me about the deal. Does it make sense? What are the numbers? How did you get there? What are the comps? Tell me about the scope of work. What are you doing, right? Does this deal make sense financially? If you're a good person to lend to and the deal makes sense, I'm interested in doing loans. Private capital investors, forget that I'm a hard money lender for a second. If I just had $100,000 and I wanted to lend to someone, even if I don't know a lot about lending to people, if I feel really good about you and I feel that you're a really good risk, and the deal makes a lot of sense to me, the likelihood of me lending you the capital that you're asking for just went up tremendously. That's why these two are the two most important questions I ask. I don't spend time asking people about their entity structure or paperwork or even looking at the purchase and sale agreement. I don't ask for any of that stuff until we can get through questions 1 and 2. Does that make sense to everybody?
Mhm.
All right. So I also like to get personal. Now, getting personal doesn't mean, high levels of intimacy or anything like that. I'm not talking about with our wives or girlfriends or boyfriends. I'm talking about just getting really personal, like getting to know the person that you're working with. Now, you can substitute the word borrower for investor, flipper, rehab, joint venture. You can swap all these words out. That's why the word borrower is in blue. You can substitute it for anything. Get personal and know who you're dealing with. That's why my first question is so important. I need to know about who it is that I'm doing business with. I want to know what their name is. If somebody just calls me up and says, "Hey, it's Bob," and I'm like, "Bob Smith?" And they're like, "No, just Bob." Okay, why aren't you telling me who your name is, right? I mean, just simple basic stuff. It's easy to check if the entity is in good standing, if they're going to buy it in an entity, right? That just takes about 4 seconds worth of Google time, and you can figure that out. You want to get intimate with their docs. You want to read their LLC stuff. You want to read whatever you can get your hands on regarding the land trust that they're using. You want to get into the operating agreement. You want to find out who is authorized to sign things. You want to disclose these things if you are the borrower. You should not be trying to hide this stuff from someone who's trying to give you money. If you hide any of this stuff from someone who's trying to lend you any money, you're just sending massive red flags up. And no one that you have conversations with is going to trust you with their money. Rule number 1 is getting personal and sharing your personal information because it's that important to create the relationship. I know that when we're talking about dealing with banks, I tell people there's no such thing as a personal relationship with a bank. It doesn't exist anymore. You can go have a personal relationship and you could have had it for 20 years, and the banker that you deal with could be your best friend in the entire world. But if the bank board decides to change the rules, there's nothing your friend can do about it. You can't have a relationship with a business, with an entity. You can only have personal relationships with people. And so that's why getting to know like local hard money people, because usually it's their money or like their friend's money type of stuff, right? But it's something that they are in control of. It's personal. You want to deal with private parties. I mean, if Susan had money to invest or Adrian had money to invest, I want to get to know them and I want them to get to know me, because that's just a direct relationship. If something goes goofy or wonky in a deal, I can just pick up the phone and say, "Hey, listen, I'm having this problem. Do you guys have any advice to help me get through it? Do you guys know anybody that can help me get through this?" People help people. Businesses are not alive. They can't help you. Only the people that work for businesses can help you. But business is always still business, especially when you're talking with banks. And don't be afraid to collect social security numbers and EIN numbers from borrowers.
I got a question for you, Jeff.
Yep, fire away.
Land trusts, what are your thoughts on structures? Because in Florida, we buy, well, most of us buy things in land trusts and structure them
Yep.
that way. What are your thoughts on that? And do you have any issues with that as a lender?
I don't. I mean, I use them myself. I love land trusts. Land trusts don't bother me as a lender because I understand them and I know how to use them. I think that most lenders that have a problem with them, it's because they just don't have a lot of experience with it. In a state like Florida, where it's common, you guys are more likely to bump into lenders that don't have issues with it than if you guys came up here to Wisconsin. Wisconsin had zero land trust law until 2018. We only just got it. we don't have any attorneys in our state that actually understand trusts at all. So, you know, there's a big difference between our two states. Up here, I love land trusts just because no one else understands them.
Right.
Right? So for us, that's a huge asset protection strategy, because
Yeah.
most of the attorneys have no idea that they really have no liability shield in them. They're just like, what the heck is this? And they don't know what to do with it. So we love them up here and we're not afraid of them. But you know, if I came to Florida and I was lending, it wouldn't bother me that you had one either.
Yeah.
So I'm good with all that. All right. So the other thing you want to know, whoops, sorry, I went one too far. You want to know who the owner's beneficiary signers are, and if needed, get resolutions. So like as an example, you know, we've mentioned my business partner, Derek. Derek and I are 50-50 business partners. Generally speaking, 50-50 is not a great idea. Someone needs to have the decision-making authority to knock, you know, when you guys both agree or disagree, especially if there's two of you. We don't have that. We've never fixed it. We have other things in place, but we've never fixed it for whatever reason. But in our operating agreement, so like when Derek decides to buy a house and ships it to closing, the title company always says, send me a copy of your operating agreement so I can see who has to sign. Our agreement says both people have to sign. So it is required for Derek to sign and for me to sign on every house that we buy, unless I sign a resolution authorizing Derek to sign on his own, or Derek signs a resolution that authorizes me to sign on my own. And title companies will accept resolutions, as do closing attorneys, to authorize just one party to act on behalf of the entity as long as it's a signed document. Now, resolutions don't need to be notarized or anything fancy. You just have to sign it and send it. Don't be afraid to collect driver's license, home addresses. Do not accept PO boxes. Do not accept UPS store boxes. Do not accept anybody that has any kind of mailbox that isn't their house. The reason is if something goes wrong, it's a lot harder to track people down when you don't have their real addresses. Now, I know nobody on this call is, you know, thinking about cheating and screwing anybody over. So that means that you shouldn't be afraid to share it either. You know, and I know some people get a little nervous about that stuff because of privacy concerns and that kind of stuff. But I'm going to tell you, as a guy who spent over 20 years in the IT industry, you gave up your privacy a long time ago and you have no idea. So it's just an unfortunate reality of our society. We just don't realize how much of our information is out there. I used to subscribe to a service that I literally could pull social security numbers for anyone in the US in under 30 seconds. Your data is out there. And so if you truly believe in the deal that you're doing, you should not be afraid to share your information, to get the loan, to get the deal, to make the money. It's no different dealing with someone as a person, as a lender or a borrower, than it is if you go to the bank, because the bank is going to expect everything that I'm mentioning. Social security numbers, right? For everybody. If there's wives or husbands involved, they want them too. Just be prepared to push it out. It's really no different dealing with private people, hard money lenders, or banks. It's all the same. Be okay with it.
I have a question for you, Jeff, because you know, in the FHA world, you know, all that stuff has to match up. But like in my companies, of course, I have different addresses and things like that. I would never have any home address. Like you as the lender, if you were going to lend me the money, I wouldn't have any problem giving it to you, but I wouldn't want it out there in the world, or the title company to put it out there in the world anywhere, or on the paperwork. Like you having it in your office for you would be okay. But just because of privacy out there in the world, especially if I'm a landlord, because we have a lot of landlords on here.
Oh yeah.
You know Jack Shea. And so, you know, I do like a loop-de-loop thing. So there's lots of addresses, but none of them would ever be my home address, right? So, I mean, I wouldn't have any problem giving it like to the IRS or certain legal, you know, if I was in court to a judge or to you, you know, if you're loaning me money, because I'm not trying to hide from the people who matter, quote unquote. You know, I'm not trying to hide from any legal ramifications or anything. I just don't want it out there for the general public to show up.
Yes.
Because
And-
so it doesn't really, quote unquote, if I'm understanding you correctly, it doesn't matter to you that it isn't out in the world for the world to see. You just want it, if you need to be like, hey, Susan, where's my money? Where did you go? Don't abscond with my money, right?
Yes,
That's
that
really
is
right.
exactly
But if you
it.
do, what happens? If I don't show up for like a week or two, or you don't hear from me and you need to sign off my project or whatever to get it back, you just want to know where I am at, right? To find
I
me.
just need to know where to send Guido.
Yeah.
Right.
So he can come and break my leg if I don't pay, right? Okay.
Right.
Okay.
So, yes, inside like the trust documents, the LLC documents and stuff like that, is it acceptable to have PO boxes and stuff like that? Yes.
Yeah.
But from personal information that needs to be kept, for the lender in order to be able to come collect if need be, that's important.
Okay.
There's a lot of private individuals out there that, quite honestly, they just don't know any better. And, none of them are really on the call because we're all investors on the call. And so it becomes our responsibility to learn these things so that we can educate the people that we're doing business with, right? Because it's our responsibility to take care of the people that entrusted their capital with
Agreed.
us, right? It's important for us to take care of the hard money lender because they entrusted their capital to us. It doesn't matter whether someone knew or understood the risk and that they could lose all their money. To me, that's irrelevant because it's irresponsible to have that attitude of, well, they knew the risk, whatever, screw them. That's awful. And no one should want to do business with you if that's your attitude.
Well,
So-
oftentimes, Jeff, too, private lenders. I mean, that's like in my note
Yeah.
meetup. I mean, that's the idea is too, is if you can cultivate maybe, private lenders, for some long-term things or whatever. I mean, that's great that Andrew has that new product, but until I'd heard about that from him, there aren't necessarily a lot of long-term products with some good rates unless you have a job, or which a lot of us full-time investors, I don't have a job. I'm not, I'm not bankable. I mean, because who wants to pay taxes on a whole lot of money, So oftentimes those of us investors, we don't have a lot of, we don't make a lot of money, and the IRS, we're not good on paper, for lack of a better word, so we're not traditional loans, so we can't get those good rates. So a lot of time private lending is the way that we go. So to protect your private lenders, you should have all that paperwork and it should be done right. Yeah. So all these things are very important. Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. So let's talk about just basic information that you need to know in every single deal. Now, I'm just going to tell you that everything that's about to show up, you as a flipper, you as a landlord, you as the buyer of a piece of property need to know all of this stuff. You as a lender need to know the exact same information. There is no difference between a buyer, borrower, investor, lender when it comes to the information that needs to be shared to make an educated decision as to whether or not you should participate in a project. So purchase price, rehab, scope of work, right? That's what SAW, right? Make sure all the contracts and addendums are complete and signed. I actually had to add that to my application process when I asked for the purchase and sale of contract and the addendums, that I actually had to put that in there, that I want the signed copies, because otherwise I used to get people that would just send me blank ones. I'm like, well, a blank one doesn't do me any good. I need to know about the deal. Right? I need to know about that rehab. I need to know about an ARV, a BPO, or an appraisal. I need to figure out what the real value is going to be when this thing's all done and fixed up. Doesn't matter if I'm the buyer, doesn't matter if I'm the borrower. You need to know these things. How
detailed do you require the scope of work, Jeff?
Well, it depends, right? So it goes back to our conversation about how I like to pay contractors.
Mm-hmm.
So if the contractor wants fewer draws, I can tolerate a little bit less detail in the scope of work because, well, I'm only going to pay for what the scope of work outlines. So if he wants to lump 5 things together in one lump, well, I'm sorry, Mr. Contractor, but I'm not giving you a dime until you finish all 5, because that's how you defined it, not me. Now, I'm usually a little bit more nice and politically correct than, you know, kind of the tone that I just had a second ago when I'm actually sitting with a contractor to talk to them about their scope of work. You know, I always ask them, how would you like to be paid? And usually they go, what do you mean? How would I like to be paid? Cash? Right? You know, and I always say, well, no, let me explain to you what I mean, because I'm willing to pay you different than all of your other customers. And if it's a new contractor, generally speaking, they doubt and they second guess and they think it's too good to be true when I start talking about how I'm willing to pay people. And I pay people the same, whether it's our own personal flips that we're doing or as the lender for someone else's project. I treat everyone the same because I know that if I'm the investor buyer, it benefits me to make sure that my contractors are taken care of because my projects go better. As the lender, I get the exact same benefit because now I know that the contractor is taking care of my borrower better. So for me, it's all the same, but it is all about that scope of work. If somebody is borrowing money from us and they send me a really, really vague scope of work, I don't have a problem calling up the contractor himself and saying, hey, Bob Smith just applied for a loan. He sent me over your bids. You know, they're a little bit generic. Would you mind explaining it to me? And then I usually have them kind of just, I don't honestly really even care what they have to say at that point. I mean, I'm listening, but I'm just trying to open the conversation, because what I'm really trying to do is I'm going to say to the contractor, well, listen, I do something that's a little different as a lender than most do in handling the draws and, you know, getting you paid. How would you like to get paid more often? And they would say, well, yeah, of course. How is that going to happen? And I say, well, you know, if you can take the scope of work for me, if you wouldn't mind, and break it down into smaller tasks, I can pay you in as fine of a detail as you can come up with for tasks. So if you want to be paid 10 times during this project, I need 10 tasks to get completed. Right. And so that's how I just have that conversation. And they go, well, that's a lot of work. And I go, well, you know, it's a cash flow thing. And I understand that. And if you want more cash more often, then this is what it'll take to get there. If you're okay only getting paid twice or maybe 3 times in this 3-month project, I'm okay with that too. I just thought I'd offer to pay you faster. And, you know, usually in the beginning, they'll not take me up on it. And then they'll talk to another contractor who is taking me up on it. And they go, oh, wow, that really is that good. And then they immediately switch, you know, and it's actually gotten to the point now where we have contractors in our local market that ask the other investors in town who they borrowed their money from. Because they're actually looking for me as the lender because they know I'm the only one in town that pays as fast as I do. And so it really starts to make a huge impact in everyone's performance when you treat them better than average. So, and it really doesn't take any extra work or you know, it's pretty minimal to pay more often. And it's an insignificant cost for us. You got to know about down payment, cash reserves, right? So we need to know about money. Where's that all going to come from? What kind of property is it? Is it a single family home? Is it a condo? Is it a duplex, triplex? Is it a small multifamily? Is it a warehouse? Is it office space? Not all lenders like all property type, right? So there are some lenders that love mobile homes. I haven't found any yet for Adrian because I saw him perk up in his chair. So I had to say that. Right. So there are some lenders that like storage units. There are some that like warehouses. There are some that like big apartment complexes. There are some that don't like small apartment complexes. There are some that only like up to 4 units. There's some that only like up to 20 units. There's some that like, you know, whatever kind of property you can dream up. Different lenders like different things. And so you have to be able to describe that to yourself to make sure it's a good deal. And you have to be able to describe it to the lender, because how else are they going to try to figure out whether or not the as-is value is correct, the ARV, BPO, or appraisal are correct? How are they going to know if they're comfortable with it, you know, if you're not even disclosing that? You know, sometimes people just say, well, listen, I got a property. That's it. It's as much as they say. I got a property. I'm paying 100,000 for it. It's going to be worth 250 when I'm done. I need to borrow 180. And there's not enough information there to really make an educated decision. And so you have to disclose. The other thing I like to know about things, you know, is how many other projects have you done? You know, I don't necessarily need to know somebody's done 100 flips or anything crazy like that, but you know, are you brand new to the business or have you been doing this for a while? I know one of the things that I do in our market, because, you know, all of the REIAs in the state of Wisconsin, I'm connected with. And so as I get loans that come in from around the state, if someone's brand new to the business, I don't want to lend to them unless I can marry them up with an experienced investor. And so I'm constantly referring all the new people to experienced people to get mentorship programs or just joint venture deals or apprenticeships or whatever you want to call it. Sometimes people want to get paid. Sometimes they want a part of the deal. I leave it up to the two people to kind of figure out what they want to do, but I'm always trying to network, match, and marry people as much as possible. So, diligence basics, right? So as a lender, and even if I was a private lender, these are things that the private lending side needs to know. They need to collect a basic application. If it's appropriate, a credit authorization. I don't personally check credit on any of my short-term loans that are in my backyard because I don't care. And honestly, I don't even check bankruptcies. I do look for liens and judgments against people to make sure that, you know, they're not going to get tagged onto my property or the place I put the loan. I think a good lender needs a loan calculator. I think a good investor needs a loan calculator. I think that if any of you guys on here, and I get nothing for saying this, but if you haven't taken Gary Johnston's Freedom Financial Principles class, you really need to take that one and give it a very serious look. You need to be able to track any loans that you give out. You also need to track the loans you take out. So if you're the borrower, you need to keep track of the loans that you have. If you're the lender, you need to keep track of the loans you gave people. And you also need to know about the insurance company. When we're involved, I call the agents. I make sure that the policy that's being purchased is correct. Oftentimes, especially with newer investors, although I do still see it with some that are seasoned investors, well, they'll go out and buy a homeowner's policy on a house that they're doing a flip, which is vacant, which doesn't qualify for homeowners. And if that thing burnt to the ground, I, as the lender, would never get paid. Because the insurance company would say, well, no, this is a vacant property. This is for business. It's not for home. And they would just disqualify the thing in a heartbeat. So learning what these things are as both a borrower and a lender is going to help position you for what you're doing. Now, when I'm a lender, I don't necessarily check bankruptcy, but I will tell you that if you've had one recently in your career, or semi-recently, you should consider disclosing that stuff. Because if a deal ever goes sideways and you didn't disclose that you were, you know, a little bit higher financial risk, the court system's not going to look well on you for failing to disclose that. So, you know, you got to be honest with people when it comes to that stuff. But most like private individuals, they don't necessarily care about credit checks either. They just want to know you, they want to know the deal, and they want to know that you're a good person to work with. So what are all the things that as flipper lenders, rehabbers, whatever it is, what do we all need to know, right? And this part we're going to go pretty quick through because this is all going to be just really basic common sense things that, you know, you guys are probably all gathering for information now, whether you're the buyer or investor, but they just need to be mentioned. So if you're going to invest in a property, you need to know the address. You need to know the construction type. Is this a stick-built home, or like for you guys in Florida, is it a mobile home? Is it a one that's made of the cinder block stuff that you guys do down there? Because we don't really do cinder stuff, any kind of block or concrete houses up here. It's almost unheard of. You know, almost everything that we do is stick-built. But it is important to know the age because stick-built homes have changed over the years. You know, when everybody says it's a 2x4, years and years ago, it actually used to measure 2 inches by 4 inches. Now, today, it does not measure 2x4. It's an odd size. Why? Because it's 2x4 with the drywall attached to it. Right? So it's a little bit different now. So it's important because you have to know what you're dealing with in the project. How many bedrooms and bath? You need to know bedrooms and bath just to figure out your ARVs and all that fun stuff, right?
Jeff, is there any age of home or any type of obsolescence, for lack of a better word, or characteristic of any type of property that maybe a new lender or new investor should watch out for or stay away from that you found in your experience?
Yes. So if I was a brand new capital investor and I was looking to lend money, I would try not to go back past 1970, 1975. That'd kind of be my limit for how far back I want to go. 1975 is kind of that magic number because that was when a significant amount of code changes happened. Lead paint, all that stuff happened right around 1975. Structure wise, you can go back into probably the mid 60s and you'd still be okay. But once you get past the 60s, you know, the likelihood of, especially if you can tell the house has never been renovated, you're going to start running into some pretty significant foundation issues. You're going to start running into knob and tube wiring, and you're going to just start running into galvanized or lead pipes. There's just a lot of nasty stuff that, you know, everybody used to think was safe that's not, and asbestos as well. So yeah, you don't want to go back to 1902. That's very unsafe, especially for a new investor. Now, if you're experienced, you're seasoned, you understand rehabs and renovations yourself, and you can go into a house and take a look at it, and it's from 1902, and it's a big project, and the borrower is going to be someone with a lot of experience, is it going to be less harmful to jump into that deal? Yes, the risk goes down with experience. The risk goes down when the scope of work on a project like that goes up, because they're planning to replace and gut all the plumbing and gutting and replacing all the electrical, right? So when you get someone experienced who can deal with those types of things, the date can start to move back and you can look further back. But when you're new, you don't want to go deal with that stuff. You know, up here we have basements. You know, I know down there you guys pretty much have slabs. Well, up here we get a lot of foundation issues because of all the clay. Because when they build houses, they, for whatever reason, and I've never been able to figure out why contractors don't do this right, but when you have clay in the ground, you have to fill the gap between our concrete wall from the basement and the original hole that was dug in the ground to be able to pour that foundation. You need to fill that with gravel about 75% of the way up before you put any mud or dirt back on it. They don't do that. They just fill the holes and they shove clay back down, which creates a huge vacuum and a tremendous amount of pressure. And the concrete walls over time will just snap. And I've seen some basement walls that the average person would look at it and literally want to bolt out of the house, because you'd look at it and go, oh my God, the entire house is coming down any minute. Now, it's not usually that bad, but that's what they look like to the average person when you see one that's cracked. I mean, I've seen basements with walls that are cracked so bad I could shove my whole arm through them. You know, and now they don't scare me because I've been doing it long enough and I know who to call and I know how to get it fixed. But if I was a brand new investor looking for a project like that, man, there's no way in the world I would take on a bad basement like that unless I had a JV partner who had the experience to deal with it. Because you're talking about the biggest structural part of a house for us, right? So it's important to know if you got basements or slab. Different parts of the country have different things. How many garages? You know, you guys have carports versus and or garages. And hell, I've seen a lot of people down there because you guys don't have basements. Well, yeah, it's a garage, but it's not for your cars. It's just to store your stuff, right? And up here, we have basements, and so all our stuff goes in basements. You want to know the square footage of the house. You want to know the lot size. The reason that lot size becomes important is because if somebody's sitting on an 8,000 square foot lot with a 2,500 square foot house, there is no yard. That is going to disqualify a bunch of buyers, because if anybody has kids and they want to let them go run around the yard and there's no grass, it's going to deter buyers. Now, I'm 51. My kids are out of the house. That doesn't bother me in the least, because I look at it different and go, man, that's awesome. I got no grass to cut, right? So it's completely different, but you're changing your demographics of who you can do business with, right? And there's not as many people like me who hate to cut grass as there are people who want, that have kids and grandkids to play. So what year was it built? You want pictures of every square inch. I try to get pictures of all 4 walls and the ceilings of every property that we both buy or lend on. I want detail. I already told you about the video. I like to get video walkthroughs of houses. I like to get video updates throughout the project when I'm lending. Now, when I'm the owner, right? I'm the buyer, not the lender. Do we collect as many videos? No, because it's typically for us, right? And so I don't need to prove my own projects, but if it's someone else's, I want pictures and video as often as I can get them. I want to know about all the mechanicals. I want to know about the HVAC systems. I want to know about the plumbing and electrical. I want to know how old that stuff is, which it goes back to the year built. Has anyone ever done an upgrade on the electrical service? Up here, and I'm sure, I don't know if you guys run into this as much down there, but we used to use a lot of, fuses. And we still have houses up here that have fuses in them. And there's like 6 fuses to run the whole house, which is crazy. And so every time that we run into a house that has fuses, it's pretty much a requirement that we're going to be doing an electrical upgrade to the entire house.
Oh yeah.
And, and we're going to have to go drop $5-6 grand extra to get all that fixed and taken care of. Typically when they were doing fuses, you had a maximum of a 60 amp service coming in the house. Well, I'm a retired IT guy, so that just tells you automatically, man, I got lots of electrical toys, right? I mean, I got computers everywhere and TVs, and that's just my world. So my electric bill, man, I couldn't run my house on a 60 amp service. Up here, most of the time we want 200 amp service now.
Yep.
We have a workout facility inside of our home here. And those big machines take a lot of electricity. You got to have the power to run them. And so when you do an upgrade from a fuse around here, we push straight to 200. We just skip right over 100 and go right to 2, because the cost difference between doing a 100 amp upgrade, which is only 40, versus 200 is only a couple $100. So it's a huge selling thing, but you got to understand what they are, what people are trying to do, and what you're trying to do to make sure it's good. Any toxins? This is where Susan's question of years come in, right? So 1975 is that magic year of lead paint, mold, asbestos, right? Asbestos was a big thing back then. There used to be oil. We have oil tanks. I don't know. I don't think you guys get oil tanks down there much, but we still find houses today that the furnace is an oil burning furnace with an oil tank in the basement. You cannot dispose of those things easily because of the fact that you can't throw them in landfills. So you need to know about those things. And again, it depends on what part of the country you're in. So some of this may or may not apply. Are you in a floodplain? Well, all of Florida is a floodplain, but around here, it's not. Right. So I have to pay attention to where things are in floodplains. I've got a project right now that I gave a loan to someone, and it's a bad deal for me. It'll be okay in the end, but I got to ride this thing out now for a lot longer than I had expected, because we funded a fourplex that needed to be renovated. The buyer bought the house, or bought the fourplex, went to the county or the city and got all the required permits. started all of the renovations. They got halfway through. The city came back and said, we changed our mind. We're pulling your permits. We feel this property sits too low to the ground and it's in a floodplain. You need to jack the house up 10 feet. Floodplains matter. I
Yeah,
didn't think they mattered before that.
Just a side note too, especially for anyone who's new and the flippers and that in Florida, it'll really jack your insurance up. When you go to do your flip and your retail buyer, it's going to cost them a lot more for their insurance on the other side of that. And it may cost you that in your holding costs. So that's just something to think about, is when you're out there looking for your possible flips, that is something for you to check if it's in the flood zone, because in Florida, we got a lot of lakes. So that is something to look for. So you just need to make sure that's in your cost as you're running your numbers for your flips, and where your numbers are to talk to Monica there at the, and where your end buyers need to be for buying your flip.
Yep.
Easy way to tell if there's a floodplain is to call your insurance company and ask them. They can look it up for you for free.
Oh, yeah. Yep. My house that I live in, I am 2 doors from the floodplain. 2 houses down is the floodplain. My house is not in the floodplain. And I can tell you that I'm right next to the floodplain because every single year, every spring, when the snow melts, the river floods and the water comes to 2 houses away from me. So literally I can actually like physically see the line because it literally floods every year. But, not everybody has that easy of a time telling if you're in a floodplain. So
well, Florida is a 100-year flood they look at. They have a 100-year floodplain, so you don't necessarily see it, but in the last 100 years, if it flooded, then that's what they use.
Yeah, we do the same thing here too.
Every single lake, if you have a house on the lake, you have flood insurance, like it or not.
Yeah.
Also here in Florida, I've run into gas tanks, like natural gas in the ground. So there are those things that you have to be aware of here in Florida as well. Not so much oil tanks, but gas. We had hit one with a lawnmower one time, and that's how we discovered it was there 15 feet from the house. And it was quite an ordeal. We had fire, all kinds of folks come out to try to resolve that issue. And I'm just going to put this out there. I thought lead base was pre-78. Does anybody have a confirmation on that?
Well, it's easy to Google. I thought it was 75. I could be off.
Yeah. Okay.
Methane gas, I think, is 74, right?
Nope, you are correct. 1978 is when the federal government banned consumer uses of lead-based paint. So it is 1978, not 1975.
Yeah, the 74 you're thinking about is the methane gas, I think, is where you have to get those releases for the methane gas.
Yeah, there's back in the 70s, just in general, that whole era is when a ton of stuff came out for all of these unsafe chemicals and things like asbestos that they started finally recognizing they were all cancer causing. So anyway, continuing on, raise orders. Can't tell you how many times I've had people call me up, ask me to borrow money, and they had no idea that there were raise orders that the city had placed against the property that they were buying. As in, the city said, if these repairs aren't done by this date, we're bulldozing the house, or we're going to bulldoze the garage. We, as lenders, we check for raise orders. We just assume that no one else did. And it's just a phone call. I just have to call down to the city's office and say, any raise orders on 123 Main Street? And they say, nope, you're good to go. And I go, fantastic. And so you don't bump into them very often, but the 1 minute that it takes to make the phone call saves a ton of headaches down the road for later. In that same phone call, we always ask about special assessments. We look up our taxes on the tax roll around here to make sure that taxes are current. When I'm lending somewhere that I feel is a little bit farther away from home than what I feel like driving, I have boots on the ground all over the state of Wisconsin. If you're going to be a lender around the state of Florida, make sure you have some boots on the ground, some friends, a realtor you can trust, something that people can go and check on things for you and take those the photos and videos for you, because you do not want to trust Google Maps. You do not want to trust realtor.com. You do not want to trust Zillow. You never know when their pictures were taken or put up. So that's important to make sure you've got that done. Door knock and inspection services, right? So you can go and check things by just going to knock on doors. I know that's how Bill Cook has made most of his career as an investor, is door knocking. You don't have to just knock doors to go buy properties. If you're going to lend money, go knock on the door. Find out something from the previous person, or hire an inspection service as part of your contingency for your loan. Have a third party go check it for you. Do a neighborhood survey. You know, neighborhood survey can be something as simple as you getting in your car and driving, or someone who is a professional, a real estate professional, can give you a neighborhood analysis to tell you about the schools and the churches and, you know, the crime rate and the police reports, right? So it's all fairly easy information to get, but you need to get it. And if you're the borrower, you want to look these things up too. Because if you're buying a house and it's in a crime-ridden neighborhood and you're trying to flip it, believe me, your buyers are checking this stuff. You need to go check. So you're going to find it very difficult to sell your property if you don't check this stuff. So pretty much everything that we've been talking about applies to borrowers and lenders, right? I found this out from an easy way to check if a house that you're buying that you think you want to flip, you have to find out if it's a rental neighborhood. If you call your insurance agent and ask them about your insurance, they can actually spot check the neighborhood, because they track all the insurance to see what kinds of insurance is on what kind of houses. So insurance agents can actually tell you very easily what the relationship is between homeowners and rentals very quickly. If you're going to buy rural, check the town size. Sometimes it's easy to get a flip loan in a rural market, as long as it's not too rural. But if you're planning to keep it as a long-term rental, you may find it very difficult unless you have a local bank or local credit union that will do it. You may find it hard to get long-term funding if it is considered too rural. One of the easy ways to check, and this isn't 100%, but it's a real quick down and dirty way to spot check it. Google the city, pull up their website and see how they describe themselves. Usually rural towns are proud of the fact of being rural, and they actually put it in their own description on their own website. And appraisers and adjusters and all that stuff, they look at that stuff. And if the city defines itself as rural, your appraisal is going to come back with the words rural in it. Make sure that you check average days on market. You can get that from an agent, or just not Google, not Zillow and that kind of stuff. You don't usually get it there. But find out what the average days on market. You know, you could have the best deal in the world, but if nobody's buying there, despite how hot it is, every single square inch of the United States is not super hot. All the big cities are, for sure, across most of the country, but not every square foot is. So check your days on market and make sure that it's good to go for what your timelines are. Make sure you check your school districts. This is super important. When I say check your school districts, focus specifically on the high school. The high school is the most important school that you need to learn about in the school district. How highly rated is the school district? How active are they in their sports teams? School districts make a big impact on parents' decisions on where they want to live. Check for sex offenders. Where do they live? How close are they to the schools? How close are they to the churches? Make sure that you get all of that stuff figured out. And, you know,
Quick question.
Yep.
Why the high schools and not elementary schools?
Because of the sports teams. Parents are interested, and don't get me wrong. So elementary schools are important. Middle schools are important. Parents always want to know that it's a good school district overall. But the sports stuff that happens for the kids is primarily focused on high school. So the high school will tell you that if it's a great high school with a great sporting team, the odds of the grade school and the middle school also being very highly rated is very high. So if you start with this high school first, it makes your job a lot easier.
Okay, because before I became a parent, and even now, I usually see people looking more for elementary and middle more so than high school personally. But that's good to know though.
Yep.
I never thought of that.
Yep. Just could be just different parts of the country, you know, depending on how active or important sports and stuff is. For us up here, it really has a lot more to do with our high schools than it does our grade schools and middle schools. People do look for them. I'm not saying that that's not important. I'm just saying up here, high school is the most important one for us.
Gotcha. Good point. Thank you.
Yep. All right. So working with your closer, you need to make sure that they know what the loan amount is. That also means you need to know what your lender needs to know what the loan amount is. Can't tell you how many times I've seen closing statements where the numbers don't add up. You need to make sure all the fees are there. You also need to make sure there aren't any extra fees there, right? If they're escrowing rehab money, you need to make sure that the title company or your closing attorney understands what's happening with that rehab money. Closing agents, right? So I stuck this little thing on here. I just saw this as a t-shirt. I thought it was funny. So I cut this out, right? Because a really good closing agent, and if you guys have found a really good closing agent, you will know that they really can be miracle workers for you.
That's great.
Right. So, oh, my slides all goofed up. Anyway, so these are the 6 things, right? They need to know contact info, closing dates, closing schedules, closing instructions from a lender. If you guys are considering becoming a private lender, you need to come up with a set of closing instructions. Closing instructions are, how do you want the closing to happen? What are your rules? What are your expectations? What do you need the title company to do on your behalf? That's closing instructions. If you are interested, some title companies will actually send you samples. They'll black out the name of the company so you can't see who it was, but they'll send you sample closing instructions. And if you can go get 2 or 3 different sets, you can easily make your own. You'll find that not everything is always super critical, that some lenders have, as far as maybe how you want to do business. But getting a picture of everybody's stuff is really pretty important to do. And it's really important to have them, because if you don't provide them, the title company gets to make up their own, which really means there are none. And they'll just sign documents, close it, fund it. And if it's a bad deal or there's bad things that happened at that closing, there's nothing you can do about it. And so you got to protect yourself. And so, typically when you buy a house, you get a title commitment. When you're a lender, you want to make sure your buyer gets a title commitment. Now, when you're the buyer of the property or the borrower, you would never ask for what's called a lender's policy. A lender's policy is a second form of a title commitment. It's usually a rider on the first policy, but it protects the lender against title flaws, just the same as the original title commitment protects the buyer from title flaws. So every good lender out there asks for a lender's policy. Every good lender asks for a CPL, which is a closing protection letter. It is free of charge from the title insurance company. A closing protection letter is the title insurance company giving you their guarantee that no one will misappropriate your funds at the title company. And if someone at the title company embezzled your money, you're covered. You need to have wire instructions. You need to see closing statements. And the wire instructions are not your wire instructions. They're actually wherever you're sending money to, if you're the investor with the capital coming into the deal. If you're the borrower, you want to make sure that your private source of money has the wire instructions so they can get your funds to the closing so you can close. Rosemary, I see you took your mic off.
Yeah, I had another quick question, and
Yep.
I'm only bringing this up because I ran into an investor
Mhm.
that wanted somebody to run, do a title search, but they didn't want to use a conventional title company because they didn't want title insurance. I'm new at this, and I
Mhm.
found that a little odd, personally. What's your opinion on that, especially from a lender's perspective?
So I'll tell you both sides. So as a matter of fact, yesterday, my business partner, Derek, and I, we are in the middle of buying a property from someone. And the question is, should we or should we not get a title policy to protect us? The reason for us not to get it is because we're being cheap and don't want to pay for it, right? The reason to get it, of course, is to make sure that there are any title flaws. 99.9% of the time, title policies never have claims against them because title companies do that good of a job in screening that stuff, and they usually can get everything documented and cleaned up before closing. That doesn't mean that there aren't title flaws that make it through. That's what title insurance is for, is to make sure that any of those that slip through. As a buyer, I may or may not want it. It depends on what kind of risk I, as a buyer, want to take on it. Now, that's assuming I'm paying cash. Okay. If I'm borrowing money, I'm going to put my lender's hat back on for a second. There's no way in the world I'm going to give you a loan if you don't have title insurance. And there's no way in the world that because I can't get my lender's policy without you having title insurance, because it's usually a rider on the first. So they go hand in hand. And I, as the lender, can't be protected in the closing properly if I don't have my lender's policy. So as a lender, I would never let it go. If I'm buying and I'm paying cash, it's just a choice of risk. How well do you know the borrower? If you ran a letter report and you pulled the stuff up and, it's grandma and she's lived there for the last 80 years all by herself, and she's owned the house free and clear for 65 of those 80 years. Is it as big of a risk to not take a title insurance policy, as a buyer? No, it's not, because the likelihood of anything ever going wrong with that's, almost slim to none. But what happens when you go to sell it and there's something that turns up later? Well, then you're personally responsible for it if you don't have that title policy. So it's just a risk reward thing. What are you willing to risk? What are you willing to take on as those types of challenges? So I don't know. To date, I don't think we've ever decided not to take out title insurance, other than maybe once or twice, because we do actually feel it's that important, even though we know the likelihood of us ever making a claim is ridiculously small. But when you'd make one, or if you hear about somebody that's had one, there's nothing like not losing 75 or 100,000 in a deal because your insurance pays for it. So,
Hey, Jeff, have you
Yep.
had a situation where you've actually filed a claim against a lender's title policy and have physically gotten a payout? I've never had it happen before.
Yeah, I have never had it done. I've done over 1,000 loans. I lost track, so I know I'm over 1,000 loans, but I've never had to file a claim either as the buyer or as a lender against the title policy.
Seems like a good business to be in.
Oh, it is. It's very profitable for the
Like they
for the
never
title companies. Yeah, for the
Yeah,
title
I mean,
insurance companies, it's ridiculously profitable. I mean, there's nothing like, selling insurance nobody claims on.
My father did. He got double paid.
Nice.
They had IRS liens and everything all over it, and the title company had to pay for it. And then the lady, when she closed, his lien was still on there, and she had to negotiate his lien down.
Yeah. I mean, people have done it, and the people that have made the claims and gotten the funds and stuff, they'll swear by the policies. It's one of those things, right? It's a risk reward thing. It's Murphy's Law. You know, the time that you don't get it is the time that you're going to need it. So anyway, so preparing docs. This one is a bit of a pet peeve of mine because of the fact that I'm both a borrower, but primarily a lender. Who designed the paperwork? Do they even understand hard or private money? If you're a private investor and you're looking to put up your personal cash, please do not let the borrower get you the paperwork. That is like one of the most risky things that you can do, is to trust your borrower so much that they're the ones that file or prepare the mortgage and note for you. If they prepare the mortgage and note for you, I can almost guarantee it is leaning in their favor, not yours. So if it's your money, please go get your own attorney, and please make sure that it is tipped so that if something goes wrong, you can get your money back. Do you understand, or do they understand how to solve problems? And sometimes this, unfortunately, is attorneys, right? And who fills out the paperwork? So you either want an attorney to fill out your paperwork, or you want an attorney to design your paperwork that's simple to follow, that you can fill out on your own. But the paperwork in and of itself needs to originate from an attorney if you guys want to stay safe. And you guys as borrowers, if you're the flipper trying to borrow private money, please don't use your own paperwork. I know that a lot of times you think that you're trying to do a service for the investor with the money, and you are to a certain extent, but you're also taking on a huge risk, because if you provide that paperwork and something goes sideways, you could get tagged with practicing law without a license because you provided legal documentation and advice to your borrower. So that it's really not a good idea. That's why it's a pet peeve of mine. I've cleaned up an awful lot of other people's deals over the years and helped them get their attorneys involved and got the paperwork done and fixed. So I've just seen a lot of really bad stuff on it. So please, on this one, play it as clean, straight, and above board as humanly possible. Again, we already talked about mortgage or trust deed, promissory note, cognovit judgment. I don't know if Florida has it. Wisconsin is not a cognovit state. Cognovit means that in the event of default, the borrower is already conceding to judgment. So as soon as it is declared in default, there's a judgment. You don't even have to go to court to get it. Wisconsin is not a cognovit state. Illinois is a cognovit state. So some are, some aren't. So I don't know if Florida is. You guys should check. If cognovit is allowed in your state and you are planning to lend money, you absolutely want to use a cognovit lien or a cognovit promissory note to make sure you're covered. You want to make sure you get an assignment of rents. Even if it's a flip, there's nothing that can truly stop a borrower from putting tenants into the property. If they do, you want to be able to collect the rents because it's your money, and that's not the deal you made if it's a flip. Now, if you're lending for a rental, you are expecting the borrower to put a tenant in and collect rents and make payments to you. You still want the assignment of rents, because if they fail to make their monthly payments, you want to have the right to collect the rents to get paid. And then anything above and beyond what you're owed, you would then forward off to the investor, unless they're behind on payments, and then you can apply it towards that stuff. Where are you getting your legal description from? I usually grab mine from the title company or the attorney. I don't like to pull them myself. I like to make someone else on the hook for it. I also grab the tax parcel or parcel ID number. They get called, it's sometimes called a tax key. It's a whole bunch of different names for these things. I also get that from the title company or attorney. I don't like to be the one that comes up with it, because, well, if you get the legal description wrong, you can put up a mortgage and a note and have it invalidated because it's against the wrong property. Even if it's against the right one, it's wrong if the legal description is wrong, because that property doesn't exist. It's very, very particular about how those are done. All right, so closing, celebration time, right? We made it all the way to the end. You guys had your private investor bring in their money. You had your hard money guy bring in the funds. So you get to celebrate the closing. We actually have a title company in our area that celebrates closings. Every time you close, you get a bottle of champagne. Now it's a $2 bottle of champagne, so don't get too excited. It doesn't even taste good, but it's just the idea of the fact that they literally celebrate every closing that they do. They've been doing it forever. It's kind of cool. This is actually the approval of the release of funds. This is something that I learned a while ago. A lot of lenders don't do this. They, in our closing instructions to the title company, it says I have to get a copy of all the paperwork signed, emailed over to me for approval prior to the title company being allowed to release the funds to closing to finalize the closing itself. So we've actually broken the signing and the funding of the deal into two separate steps now. This way, if the paperwork's not done correctly, I can get it fixed before the funds are applied. If somebody's trying to do something funky, I still have the opportunity to grab the funds and pull them back from the title company. You always want the original note as a minimum. I like to get everything original if I can, but you need the note as an original. Most states you can't foreclose without an original note. You don't necessarily need an original mortgage because it's recorded, but the note you almost always do. So last couple thoughts. If you're not paying for the product, you are the product. So don't sell yourself short. So that could be you as the flipper, could be you as the rental, could be you or the landlord, it could be you as the lender, could be you as just the guy browsing Facebook, right? So just pay attention to what's going on, because someone's trying to make money off of you or with you. It's better to make it with you than off of you. Investing is not about size and strength, but rather skill and positioning. This applies both sides. If you're the borrower or you're the capital investor, it is not about size and strength. It is about skill and positioning. It's about getting better, and you have to get better before you get bigger. And if bigger was always better, a nickel would be worth more than a dime, which is by far not true. Right? So,
oh my gosh.
Jeff,
yep.
do you always give or do your borrowers request a satisfaction of mortgage or lien?
Yes.
When they're through paying?
Yes. Matter of fact, it actually doesn't matter if the borrower requests it or not. In, I believe, every single state, there's usually a statute that requires the lender to satisfy and release the lien within X number of days after they've received their funds. In Wisconsin, we have 30 days. As a lender, I'm obligated legally to satisfy and release that lien. And that is how it is in most states. Because otherwise, if you don't, as soon as that person decides to go sell it, there's still an open mortgage.
Yeah.
Because it was never released. So you really want to release it just as good habit, but it is usually a legal requirement to take care of too.
Thank you.
Yep, you're welcome. Some investors are cheap and greedy and don't understand the value you bring to the table. This one, unfortunately, is a comment against most of our flippers and landlords when we're dealing with private capital people. It's not always about how much money you're going to make as the flipper or as the landlord. It's about how much money you're going to make together. And that's what separates that one out. So never, never, never write a check directly to a borrower. If you have money, do not give it away. It's the same thing when I said, don't, write a big check for all the rehab funds at closing. That's a dangerous game to play. This one is specifically just for people who want to be private lenders. My world changed the day I learned this one. Money is a drug. Get your borrowers hooked. Because if you do, they'll keep coming back, and that's how you keep your money busy and deployed in good deals, right? And what I mean by money as a drug is make it easy to do business with you. If you want to lend money, make it easy. When I saw Andrew's slide, right, 3/4 of his slide is crossed out. Why? Because Andrew is doing exactly this. He's making it easy to do business with him. And that's important. You want to do business with people that want to do business with you, and they don't want to make the business so complicated that no one can make any money. That's the kind of people you want to work with, right? So that's pretty much it. And I know we're a couple minutes.
Jeff, we do have, I think Dory had her hand up. You can't see her, she's in the grass, but she's definitely had her hand up there for a moment. So Dory, you want to ask your question?
Oh, I see it
That
now.
was a great presentation, Jeff. I want to thank you for your support of land trusts. Despite their longevity in Florida, it's still difficult here. For the buy and hold investor and for consistent returns for the lender, do you have any words on long-term products?
Yeah, I mean, there's a ton of long-term product out there, especially in the alternative world that varies from banks. You know, the product that like Andrew was talking about before, that's not a bank product. I can tell just based on the couple things that he mentioned about it. Banks really, there's very few in the country that'll do a 30-year product right now. Almost everybody out there is trying to push all the 5-year adjustable rate mortgages. Here's the thing you got to pay attention to as an investor. You go to the bank and the bank says, I'll give you a loan for 3.25%, 5-year adjustable rate mortgage. And you think, man, because you like people hear 3.25 and their ears turn off and they stop listening to everything else the banker says. And they get so excited about the interest rate that they don't necessarily make the right choice. Andrew comes along and he says, mine's at 4.75 for 30 years fixed. Which one's a better deal?
Fixed.
Right? The 4.75 at a fixed rate is a killer kick-ass deal because an adjustable rate mortgage is dangerous. And let me give you an example of why I'm against adjustable rate mortgages. Back in 2008, when the market took a shit, excuse my language, but that's, right? Everybody knows that's what happened. When the market took a dump, all the banks had all these adjustable rate mortgages that came due. What most people don't realize is that there are 3 aspects to an adjustable rate mortgage. Everybody knows about one, everybody forgets about the other 2, because the first one is the only one they pay attention to, and then the ears turn off, which is at the end of the 5-year term, the bank can raise my interest rate up 2%. Now, nobody sits there and says to themselves, man, I can't wait till they raise my rates 2%. But when you sit down and think about it from a long-term perspective, rents in theory should be going up. And if in 5 years from now, your interest rate went up a few percent, it's not going to take your payment per month and all of a sudden bury you with a 2% change. You should still be financially in a good position. But when the market interest rates jump 5%, the bank goes to option 2, which you didn't read in the contract and the agreement, which is they go, hey, Dory, we've decided not to increase your interest rate by 2%. And you go, wow, that's fantastic. But then they finish the sentence and say, instead, we've decided to not renew. And when they don't renew, that means you have to go refinance because they're trying to force people to get into the higher interest rate products.
Or you can lose the house.
Right. So what now happens though, if you're in the middle of a financial crisis like we had back in 2008 through 12, and you can't refinance? So stage number 3 kicks in, which is their call provision, which says, well, you didn't do what we said you were going to do because we told you to go and refinance and you've never missed a payment. So you're not in default, but they can still call the loan due on you all of a sudden. And now you're in foreclosure and you've never missed a payment. That happened to a ton of people back the last time around. So you got to pay attention to all of them. So right now we're in historic low interest rates. Where do you think we're going to be in 5 years from now based on how the economy's behaving and how our government's behaving? Do you think that we're going to have another situation where interest rates are going to go up? If you think interest rates are going to go up, then you better start thinking about talking to guys like Andrew and getting those 30-year product locked up now. Because 4.75, hell, 6%, quite honestly, is a killer kick-ass rate. When you're talking about the next 30 years, you got to stop thinking short term. And if you're going to be a landlord, you're going to hold it long term. You got to think long term. So 30 years at a 6% rate. My dad is a retired credit union president. My father-in-law, strangely enough, is also a retired credit union president. Both of them have told me point blank 7% is a great rate. But historically, our country has forgotten that that's a good, safe, solid interest rate because we've just had interest rates now so low for so long, no one can remember what normal is. So anything really up to 7%, if the deal works and it cash flows, it's a good deal, and you guys should be jumping all over that stuff.
Now, do you have that product?
What's that?
Do you have that product, Jeff?
I do have that product.
Oh.
I remember when 10% was the norm,
Oh yeah.
and
Yeah.
that was a good deal
Yep.
as an investor.
I was a little kid when they were 18 and 24, but I do remember it because of the fact that my dad was in the credit union business. So I remember hearing about that stuff. Most kids, back then have no idea, and I'm 51 and I shouldn't have any idea what 24% interest looks like. I shouldn't be old enough. I just happen to be fortunate enough to be in a family like that I got exposed to it. But, we have to look at things as an investment. And that doesn't matter if you're going to lend money or if you're going to be the borrower. You got to look at stuff as an investment, and you got to be thinking about the long term. Flips are awesome. I love flips. Flips generate lots of cash. We use them for down payments. That's our game plan. But if you want true wealth, it's all in the long-term product, and you got to have a good lender to work with that's got good product and good long-term locked-in stuff. That's really where you create your wealth.
Hey, Jeff, I appreciate you saying that, because I was, which I am a loan signing agent still, but at that time I was in the process of becoming a mortgage broker, and I went to school and all that. And every time I used to go in front of the loans, because as a signing agent, I go around and see all types of loan, and that was like going out of style. These 5-1 arms, these balloon, and I'm looking at these people's like, do you not I'm looking at them like, do you not realize what you're doing and what you're putting yourself into? Yep. Unless you could take care of it like the next 2 weeks, why are you doing these? But I didn't say anything. I'm just looking. I was like, I'm not doing that. I'm learning from their mistakes. I'm not doing that. And it's funny that you say that, because I always thought, like, even as an investor, why do you want to do that? Why take that risk? Because life happens. And I always think, what if you can't get rid of it in 3 years or in 2 years and all this crazy stuff? So I appreciate you saying that. Now I know that I was thinking on the right track with those, because I've seen a lot of people hurt from those big time.
Oh, yeah.
At that time. And of course, as it got worse, is like, oh yeah, we lost this and we lost that. I'm like, oof. I like fixed. Fixed is safe. And I remember the 16% loan when my mom had her house.
Yep.
So I totally get it. We're at what, 4? And I'm like, man, I told my husband, let's look into this 2% right now.
Oh yeah.
As long as it's fixed, I take anything fixed. I don't do any balloon arms. I don't do any of that. I don't care if I'm investing, if I'm flipping it next week. I like safe. Safe is good sometimes.
Safe is how you're going to survive the next downturn.
Pretty much. But thank you. I appreciate that.
Jeff, can you talk a little bit about fees before we wind up? Because some folks have sent me a couple of messages about fees and getting loans or giving loans. What's acceptable? What should we be scared of? What's the norm, etc.
So here's okay. So I'm a pretty candid guy. I don't BS a lot of stuff. Someone else I saw had, and I won't say exactly who they asked the question about, but they had sent me a private message in the chat asking me about a specific company that's run by a specific person. And I'm going to answer that question because it'll answer really what you just asked. So what's a good loan? Well, the truth is, it's the same thing as if you said, well, what's a good guru? Or who's a good joint venture partner, right? They're all the same answer. What works best for you? What works best for the deal? Because not every lender, not every joint venture partner, not every guru is a specialist in that particular scenario that you're trying to work on. So what is normal and customary for that? Unfortunately, it depends answer. If you're trying to do a deal that has higher risk in it, expect higher fees. expect it. Expect higher interest rates. Here's the thing though. Part of the reason why I tried to take, even though we're talking about money and kind of talking about private capital and all that stuff, why the reason that I took kind of a due diligence approach to it all is because of the fact that it's so important as buyers to put on the lender's hat for a minute when you're doing deals. You have to learn to think like the people who are taking the financial risk in the deal. You have to be able to put that on because you have to be able to decide, just because you think you're going to make 50 grand doesn't mean it's a good deal for your lender. It might be too risky. And so if you came to me and I said, oh man, no, I'm going to pass. I mean, the only way I'd do a deal with you is, man, I want like 36% interest and 25 points, right? I mean, I could come up with some crazy, insane number. And Andrew might come along and go, no, man, I do these all the time. So for Andrew, it's not a big risk. And he goes, I'll do it for 10-2 or 8-1 or 12-3, or he comes up with some numbers that are just way below what I quoted you. But which one is the right set of numbers? Whichever one works for you. If I was the only one who said I was interested in the deal and my fees were ridiculous, but the deal still really works well for you and you're going to make a good, healthy profit, what difference does it make? Because without that loan, you make nothing. And so, now, do you want to sit there and find a lender that, has a gazillion junk fees? Again, I mean, I think that Andrew's slide, it was really, as a lender, it was super impressive to me because I don't see slides like that often. Usually I see the exact opposite in slides. I see, the application fee. I see the doc fee. I see a title review fee. I see wire fees. I see things that are called fixed cost fees. And you're like, what the hell's a fixed cost fee? I don't know what a fixed cost fee is. And I've done loans where there was one in it. It's just people and lenders will just add fees in because people will just pay them. So review the fees that are on there and request the things that make no sense to be taken off. Sometimes you can get them taken off. Sometimes you can't. But if you never ask, I guarantee you're always going to pay them. And if you find a lender that seems like they're really good to work with, but they're ridiculously expensive, it's time to move on. Go find another lender. I think that it's awesome that you guys have someone like Andrew that's got the program he's got. I think it's awesome that you guys have a lender like Andrew who waives and gets rid of most of those fees. If you're dealing with a private investor, 99% of the time, private lenders don't even realize they should charge points or could charge points or could charge an attorney fee if they used an attorney to close it. Ridiculous fees, yes, avoid them, run for the hills and get away from lenders that do that crazy stuff. But it's okay to pay some fees if it's a really, really good deal. So there's no right answer, no wrong answer. It's the same thing, when with the question about, the one lending company, are they a good lending outfit? Yes, they are. I know exactly where they get all of their money, and all of their money comes from pension plans, insurance companies, and hedge funds. They have access to countless billions of dollars. I don't remember. I've had conversations with that guy, and I haven't talked to him recently, but at the time that I talked to him, he was writing between $5 and $7 million a month in loans. I know for a fact he's way bigger than that now. And the reason that he's bigger is because he's providing a service that investors do find value in, because if they didn't, they wouldn't close with him and he would do zero. So is he good? Yes. Is he perfect? No, because none of us are. I'm not going to tell you I'm perfect either. I doubt Andrew would tell you he's perfect, but you just got to
No,
find that
Andrew
right
would
time.
tell us he's perfect. So that's
Would he?
wrong. I'm sorry, Jeff.
Oh, all right.
Yeah.
Well,
Hey, I heard that. I'm still here.
Oh, I thought you were eating pasta.
so no right answer, no wrong answer. You just got to do your homework and, ask for referrals. Ask ask around for who else in the group has borrowed money from who. Sometimes it gets a little weird. Like if I've only ever done money with like 1 or 2 private lenders, I may not want to tell you where I get my money because I may not want to share my private lender with you, but try to find people that will share that. You know, they tend to protect it because they don't know how much money that person has, and they want to make sure that that person always lends to them and they don't run out. But just keep asking. I mean, that's the beauty of the REIAs, right? It's all about networking and education and sharing amongst each other to help lift everybody up together so that we can all succeed. So just ask. Your group has a tremendous amount of information to help you find your local money. And I think Susan's got like 50 million she's willing to lend. So
there you go.
I think that's
Got
what's
a few bucks left. No.
that's probably what's under her pillow. That's not even what's under the mattress yet. So
We're just waiting for Adrian to open up his own bank and give it to us. That's what we're all waiting for.
yeah.
I keep telling you, this is my bank behind me.
The bank of wrinkled
Does
metal.
anyone else have any other questions for Jeff before we wrap this part of our evening up? Okay, because we have some other questions for you, Jeff, but I'm going to save those for the meeting after the meeting.
Yep.
Oh, I
Man, I
have
tell you,
one question.
Oh, there's always one. Okay. What?
I know. Sorry. Hey, Jeff, I was checking out your website earlier. I saw 3 products: bridge, burr, and then like the long term.
Yep.
What is the burr for you? Like just in a snapshot, like what is the differentiator between the 3? I mean, I kind of know the one and the last one, but what's the middle one?
Right. Well, so there's 4 products. You can't see the one of them because I don't do it anywhere other than Wisconsin and Illinois. So my website hides it because it looks at where your IP is. But there's 4 different products. But the reality is that the flip product and the burr product are almost identical. They're really construction loan type projects or products. Burr, right, is the acronym that Bigger Pockets coined. Right. I don't even remember all the names. I just keep calling it burr now. So I start forgetting. So is it buy?
That's
renovate?
actually smart. So you're basically using that as a strategy to not confuse borrowers, even though they're the similar loan product and similar underwriting. You're just making it blatantly obvious that you can use this product for both of these purposes.
Correct. So if somebody comes to me and they've got a house that needs renovations, right, exactly the same as a flip, let's say. In a flip, usually people will have a slightly larger scope of work and they'll do more renovations to the property because they're trying to flip it, right? And retail buyers have a higher appetite for quality product than say a tenant does in typical situations. So by having the 2 products, it helps me identify their plan for the property right away. So if you want to do a burr, it tells me that you've got a product or project that you bought at a discount. It needs renovations. Your scope of work will probably be a little bit smaller because you're only going to renovate it for rental. But then it also tells me that I want to take a look at and make sure that you can qualify to get financing on the back end of that loan, because a burr loan is still a short-term construction loan. It's not a long-term loan product. So that's when I start looking at it and whether I'm using my own guys to get the approval or, because I don't require people, if you get a burr loan from me, you got to get a long-term loan from me. No, whatever's the best deal is where I tell my clients to go. So if there's a local bank that they want to go deal with, I just tell them like, listen, I realize you can't tell me and prove that you can qualify for a loan in 6 months from now, but can you go get a pre-approval from a bank to tell me at least if you'd qualify today? Because the likelihood is you will still qualify in 6 months. Just so I know we've got an exit strategy in play. But the burr loans, they're also nice too, because, well, if somebody gets to the back end and all of a sudden they can't refinance, we can still sell it as a flip. And so it's built in with 2 exit strategies automatically just on the burr process in and of itself. So that's what it's there for me.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I just tell people, I tell borrowers that, you know, we just do 1 year fix and flip, and oh, by the way, you can use it for a rental and you can use it for an Airbnb and blah, blah, blah. And they just get so confused. So I think maybe this strategy makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, you know, the reason I adopted it was just because Bigger Pockets made such a big deal out of the BRRRR strategy that, you know, when borrowers call me up and I say, oh, great, well, you know, what are you going to do with the property? They immediately say, I'm going to BRRRR it. Right. And so as soon as they say BRRRR, well, it just makes sense to have a loan product that puts the word BRRRR right in the name for them, so they know which loan product to pick, and they can talk to me in my language. Because the reality is, right, I mean, as lenders, we do speak a slightly different version of English than the average person does. You know, we speak in acronyms up the wazoo. I'm a retired IT guy. You want to talk about the king of acronyms? You should work in IT. I mean, good God, we don't even use full words. So, you know, it's just a convenient way to handle things, I think. And I think it helps the borrowers better clarify their own projects. So am I right? I don't know, but it just seems to work for me. So. All right. Anybody else? Or do we jump to the party room?
Liz, do you want to give a quick rundown again? I don't think there's maybe but 1 or 2 people that got in since you've explained how the new link is going to work.
Yes, absolutely. First, I just want to say thank you, Jeff. I'm going to tell you something. I don't like to admit this, all right? I really don't. In fact, I don't even know if I've admitted this maybe more than once in my lifetime here at PCREIA, but I want to admit that Adrian was right, all right? Because he told me, and boy, you know I don't want to do that, but I have to do it because he told me you were great and you had some great information tonight. And the one thing that came across big time was how much you really care. And you really care about people. You're passionate about that. And on every side I heard you talking about tonight, even when someone asked you about another funder and there may be some squirrely things there, you still were kind in how you answered it. And I just so appreciate you in every way of being here tonight, being an example for all of us that are investors. And many of us are going toward that thing of being a lender eventually as we go toward retirement or other things. And you've given everybody on all sides something to think about, and certainly something that they've learned tonight. And I'm definitely one of those people. I want to thank you so very much. Really appreciate you.
You're
Everybody
welcome.
give him a virtual applause because this was awesome. Good stuff. Yes. Oh my gosh.
I do
Even
have
the
one
girl in
last
the grass
question.
is clapping, and she never claps for anybody. So this is awesome. What'd you say, Adrian?
I have one last question I forgot to ask. Someone told me to ask you, Jeff, that because I heard that you have the best paperwork when it comes to lending.
Yes, I heard that too.
I went cycling the other day with a guy that told me that.
Yeah. So you must be talking to Mr. Watson.
Yeah.
Oh, Jeff Watson? Jeff
Yeah.
Watson
Yeah,
said
that's
that?
who he was
Oh my
talking to,
gosh.
yeah.
They're buddy
You must
buddy.
have
They
got your
like-
paperwork from Jeff Watson.
I did not. I'm actually working.
Oh.
I'm working on a different project that I hired, and Jeff and I have been friends, I don't know, 6-8 years, something like that. And I hired Jeff to do a project for me. And halfway through the project, I decided I needed to revamp my paperwork for something that I saw happen with a different lender. And I never wanted to have happen to me. So I was just trying to make some modest tweaks myself because I actually design all my own paperwork. And then I have an attorney fix it for me after I get done writing it my way. And I found an attorney that I've been using for foreclosures for a while. And I approached him and I started talking to him about a couple of things. And he said, well, why don't you just play like the big boys? You act like the big boy. You should play like the big boys. And I said, what do you mean? So he rewrote all of my paperwork so that it was good to do on $100 million deal. And I got to say, after I got done reading it, I was impressed. And I don't you know, I had no idea how good of a job that attorney did for me, but he knocked it right out of the park because Watson took one look at it because I sent it to him to use for this other project. And he's like, man, this is some of the best paperwork I've ever seen in the country. So,
wow, for him to say that.
but I didn't
Holy
know he was
cow.
telling anybody else other than me. So I didn't know if he was just, you know, trying to make me feel good or what. So
And for those of you who don't know Jeff Watson, you can Google him and look him up. I mean, Adrian and Susan and, you know, several of us have met him over the years. He used to come to our meeting, Jeff, when he was down here in Florida. He would come to our meeting incognito. We wouldn't recognize him because he was the superstar. So you can't, you know, he just wanted to sneak in and listen to what was going on and then leave. But
yeah, he likes to hide.
Yes.
But you can find him at watsoninvested.com.
And he's got a great newsletter. I think he's
got a great newsletter. Yeah,
short,
great newsletter.
point.
He's got some good videos on his website about wholesaling. It's kind of staying compliant. It's all, I mean, he's revolving around Watson Invest Ted. Rosemary just asked the question. So it's Watson Invest Ted, not investing. And it's in Ohio, but the reality is what he did for his videos in Ohio really applies to all 50 states. It's really a good interview that he did. It's like 3 or 4 parts. It's really phenomenal. And
yes, I would recommend anybody getting on YouTube and listening to anything Jeff has to say. Absolutely.
Yeah,
great
absolutely.
stuff.
100%.
Okay, so listen, guys, this is what we're going to do. We're going to end the meeting now, and I have to actually close it out. Everyone should have been sent an email in your email. There's a new link to the meeting. You click on that, and as soon as I've ended this, that meeting will open up. It's my understanding. Forgive me if we lose you, and I just want to say, if I do lose you, then too bad. No, I'm not. I'm just kidding.
When you say
everyone
is a paid members is what you mean by everyone.
Yes. Yes, I'm sorry. That's correct.
All right.